Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Cryptic Corner. I'm your host, Angelo DeCipio, and tonight we are going to explore the mind-altering, mind-bending world of MKUltra. And if you don't know what that is, you will very shortly. But before we even get into that, I want to introduce you to our panelists tonight. We have a very intimate group tonight. Really interesting because I want the women's perspective. Justin was going to be with us tonight, but he has other commitments right now. So let me introduce you to our resident psychic medium, Shirley Bolstok. How are you, Shirley? How you doing, kid?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. This is going to be a fascinating show, I think.
It's going to be a good one. We'll actually have a little bit more time to talk
Cool.
because Mike's not here tonight and Justin's not. And Mariana Howard, and she is the co-author of a fabulous book. I recommend highly, excellent reading. It's called The Shadow of the Bassman. It is the Paul McCartney story from a different perspective. If you're familiar with the Paul is Dead books, and there are literally thousands of them, you'll find it interesting. The Shadow of a Bassman walks you through the death and replacement of Paul McCartney through Paul's eyes. Very, very interesting. I like what they did with it. And we'll talk about that at some length as well, because we're going to get into that tonight, believe it or not. Because I have a theory about it. And I was doing some research, Shirley, as I often do. I research my shows before I do them. And one of the things I found out that MKUltra was also into replacement of individuals. They flat out like replaced people and made no bones about it. Interesting though, I did find something that Mike Messier referred to. He talked about Nelson Mandela having passed away somewhere in the 90s, right?
Right.
Well, I found that article. And sure enough, it said, Nelson Mandela has died in prison. Like I say to everyone, Marianne knows it's one of my favorite expressions. Everything hidden in the dark will soon be revealed by the light. So, it's out there. It's just a matter of how long it takes to get the sunlight. So let's talk, you guys. Tonight we have an interesting topic, MKUltra. Now, Marianne, you weren't even supposed to be part of this show at one point, and you said, no, I want in because I know a lot about MKUltra.
Yeah.
So, you're here.
I am.
Tell everyone what you know about this interesting program. Then I'll read a little bio.
About this interesting program. Well, MKUltra, came about through the military operations. A lot of it started with bringing in Nazi scientists into the country. CIA wanted to co-op some of the projects. They were hearing that Korea had been mind controlling POWs over there during the 50s. And this was their way of trying to learn about what they could do to people and how they can manipulate for their own good, not for the good of.
And Shirley, your knowledge of MKUltra, how long have you known about this?
I've known about it for years. I've been checking into it. One of the things I was interested in, particularly looking into, is all the LSD experiments, which also happened with the Beatles too. So it'll be interesting to get Marianne's take on that, and your take also, Angelo. They would have people come in for.
Be careful what you ask for.
That's all right.
Somebody asks for my opinion, you're walking in dangerous territory.
We're ready. So what has happened here is, people were experimented on without their knowledge. Drugs given to them. Breakdowns happened. One guy threw himself out the window, and of course they covered us up and called it.
We'll talk about that. I'm glad you mentioned that in the opening because we're going to talk about that fairly soon too. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Cheryl.
And a lot of these mind control experiments were to try to destroy the personality in the person in order to bring in a whole new identity, a whole new set of memories. And people were actually not even knowing who they were anymore. And of course, in a replacement, this would make sense because they could download these new memories into someone else.
That's why I mentioned at the onset of the program that Marianne's book, the book she co-authored with Ann Walsh, that book is going to actually play into tonight's episode. Let me tell everybody officially what MKUltra is. It was a top-level CIA program started by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and his trusted assistant, lover/nurse, Elizabeth Nickson, 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 in which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments, most often on unwitting U.S. citizens, to access the potential use of, as Shirley said, LSD and other drugs for mind control. Information gathering and other psychological torture methods were also used as a part of the overall program of MKUltra. However, they were predominantly a drug-based program. And we'll get into the other methodologies tonight as well. Project MKUltra lasted, listen to this one, it's hard to even believe this, from 1953 to 1973. But the details of this program did not even become availably public until around 1975, when a fluke came out as part of an investigation. We're going to talk about this right as soon as I'm done. A fluke came out as part of an investigation into CIA, how do we want to call this? We'll call it illicit activities, covert activities. They were breaking the law, basically.
Right.
They basically investigated widespread CIA activities within the United States and other pockets around the world. And in the course of doing so, this little gem came out about MKUltra, and then, even senators perked up and said, well, let's talk a little bit about this program, MKUltra. What is it, fellas? And they had to open up the doors of the floodgates, and it got messy, and it got messy quick, and them worms was just all over the place. Like I said last week, you guys, once you let the worms out of that can, you can't put a lid bag on. It's done. So, Shirley, tell me what you know about these mind-altering experiments. LSD was the primary use, but there were other methodologies. What do you know about? What other methodologies do you know about?
Some of the methodologies I know was kind of what you would call a kind of a AI programming, repetitive stuff over and over and over and over and over. And they would play it like thousands of times, over and over repetitively in order to dig it into the subconscious.
The idea behind that, Shirley, and I know exactly where you're going with that. The idea behind that was to have it so ingrained that it became part of their DNA.
Yes.
They would, as Shirley said, they would literally play suggestions over and over, sometimes 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 times in a day, to the point of madness. Some say there were, believe it, and I'm not even making this shit up, some say there were actual scientific and medical benefits to this. Other than finding out how to go insane very quickly, I don't know what the benefits are, but it's also a great way to create the perfect killing machine, if you're interested in doing so. One of the people we spoke about last week on our show with the Kennedy assassination was in reference to Bobby Kennedy, talking about Sirhan. They believe he may be one of the most egregious of the MKUltra offenders. Depending on your perspective, Marianne, where are you with that? Do you think that Sirhan was a candidate for MKUltra, or was he a Manchurian candidate?
I believe he was. I believe he and Oswald both were, to an extent.
You're not far off on that one. I can think of, we discussed that.
We discussed that last week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I believe that they, from what you read, Sirian Sirhan is one of the most famous for being MK Ultra, and I haven't really read up a whole lot on his statements or anything that maybe came about as a result of his.
I can tell
I was
people
taken
that
out
Sirhan, it's interesting. I could tell people that Sirhan was just run up for parole, and he was, again, of course, denied parole. Right. But he is maintaining today, as he did from day one. He didn't do it. He don't remember having a gun. He doesn't know how he got a gun. He remembers being in shock. When they captured him, he was in shock. We know this because, thankfully, there were television cameras rolling at the time. Shirley, let's talk about the long and short-term effects of what Dr. Gottlieb attempted to do. And to tie into what Marianne said, Dr. Gottlieb was one of those Nazi scientists that came over here. He and his nurse, both the German immigrants. Elizabeth Nickson was in fact, she is, and this is an interesting side note. Elizabeth Nickson is the prototype of the character of Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
A surprise.
And she is also the prototype for the Netflix series Ratched. Interesting stuff. Again, Marianne, you hear me say it every week. You can't make this shit up.
You can't make it up.
You can't make it up. So with that in mind, Shirley, jump in on this. I don't want people to listen to me all night. I want you guys to talk.
No, I don't mind.
Just tell me to shut up.
One of the things that my understanding was that these experiments were originally being done in the Holocaust, and they were actually experimenting on victims in the Holocaust before they brought it to the United States.
Yep.
And of course, our military was very interested in those types of experiments because they were very much into the weaponry and protected those kind of doctors. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what, Shirley? I'm going to it's interesting because I'm going to do something here. I'm going to do something. I want you to take a look at something right behind me. Okay. You're going to see something right behind me in just a second, because I'm really curious to what you guys think about this. I want to pull something up for you. I think it was rather telling, very, very telling indeed. That's the MK Ultra logo. You see that behind me?
I don't see you.
Oh, look at that pyramid with the mind's eye.
that is
on the back of our dollar.
That is in fact the official MK Ultra logo from the U.S. Department of Defense circa 1954. In fact, that is on a leather sealed identification folder. If you look at it, it's right out of Nazi Germany. By the way, that's the all-seeing eye above the pyramid of Cheops right there. You can't make this stuff up, okay? That's real. I want you to see that. I found that today. I said, you got to be kidding me. Sometimes even I get surprised, and I know why. But I didn't know they had their own logo. It really surprised me. One of the things that we need to do, and I want to do this, it's really important that we do. I'm going to go back to this here. Is the two people involved in this are right behind me. To the right over my shoulder is that Dr. Gottlieb, and that's his lovely assistant Elizabeth Nickson. That's that gentleman right there is in part and in part and in whole, in fact, responsible for the term MK Ultra. Mind Control Ultra is literally what it is. And they took the K right from Germany because they don't spell it with a C, they spell it with a K. Now, Shirley, you were getting onto something really interesting about that, and I'm going to let you continue.
So my understanding, of course, doing, particularly they like doing experiments on twins, on their kind of way that the way they could communicate or kind of be able to telepathically communicate with each other. They were always looking for DNA connectors, stuff in the DNA that would possibly be what you would call a genetic marker for might be more of a supreme type of DNA or something that's more advanced psychically. They were definitely trying to bring out more psychic types of things.
Oh boy. Yeah,
Here
we're
we
going to
go.
talk about that tonight too. Marianne, so you have an interest in exploring this subject from a couple different levels. You did some work with forensic accounting and dealing with dirty doctors and involved with law enforcement on various and sundry levels from state to federal. And I know this. Little birdie told me.
Little birdie told you before me.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So, in what you do, has this remnants of this ugly head ever reared itself in your line of work? Because I could think of a couple examples of where it could, but
it probably could, but I mean, for me personally, no, I haven't had any firsthand experience as far as investigating or having any doctors that I'm aware of that for me. Yeah. I'm sure there probably are. Look at you go to look at Dr. Cameron, who was a mind control person who was actually conducting the experiments up in Canada.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah. So,
well, you mentioned Canada. What exposed the mind control program in Canada was a show called The Fifth Estate. And you're familiar with that. I don't know, Shirley, you know about that?
Not as much, but I've heard some.
Here's the interesting thing. Just like in this country, so many people are asleep to what's going on. Virtually none of the Canadian populace even knew that their government had such a program, let alone that it lasted so long.
So many years, yeah.
It lasted years, longer, in fact, than ours here. And ours lasted from 53 to 73. Theirs didn't get shut down until the mid-80s. And that's after everybody already knew about it. What scares me is that we talk about everything old being new again. Because what we're seeing now is so MKUltra, but it's hiding in plain sight. They're not even pretending to cover it up anymore. The idea is like, okay, so what? What are you going to do about it? I had a police detective on my show about the John F. Kennedy assassination, and those, by the way, were his exact words. They look at you and go, okay, so what? What are you going to do about it? And they're absolutely right. What do people do about it? If you don't have the power or the financial resources to fight, what do you do, Shirley? You're the psychic. Tell me.
Well, that's a very interesting question because I might have an unusual answer for you. I think in some cases I consider to be MKUltra a weapon of psychic warfare. I call it psychic warfare.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And so when I'm thinking about this as psychic warfare, and I do believe that we as humans in our minds and the way God made us is more powerful than their programs to screw us up.
Absolutely. I will tell you that I believe emphatically that not only was MKUltra not shut down, I believe it's still operative today. I believe it's still being used by the FBI and the CIA and the former National Program Office, which is now known as the National Reconnaissance Office. And these are government agencies. You can look them up. They got websites. They all have websites. Trust me. Everybody's got a website now. It's like I said, it's hiding in plain sight. You just have to go look for it. Yeah, that's it. You just have to go look for it. I believe that these programs are still active now, and I'm going to tell you how and why. Because the FBI and the CIA both use something, Shirley, that you and I are very familiar with. They're called profilers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Profilers. That's what profiler does. They're basically psychics. A remote viewer. You call them what you want. It's a psychic.
Yeah.
Most of the work that I've done as a working psychic has been with doctors, lawyers, police, and government agencies. And that's pretty much 95% of my clientele. Okay? Until I finally said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. Now I just do the occasional special guest appearance when someone needs it. But Shirley, let's talk about that. And Marianne, I want you to jump in on this because you have some information that you need to set forward. And I know that, and you know that I know that. So because I'm a psychic and you know that I know. So let's talk about this. Let's get it all out on the table. Let's get it out in the open. What do we need to do to combat it? Shirley, jump in.
All right. First of all, I am of it's not a belief system of what I consider to be that I believe our frequencies run higher than their MKUltra. I really believe that if we're educated and that if we know what's going on and we keep our God and our light connection, that it will not work on us in the same way that it may work on people who are unsuspecting. I do think that what we might call, you've heard about the Heart Projects, Operation Paperclips, all these things are looking for ways to psychically contain people in order to program them to believe a certain way, or maybe to support a particular candidate, or, get the majority rule, this type of thing, or keep the money locked up only with certain people.
Oh boy.
And maybe we should talk about Catcher in the Rye Marianne, and the John Lennon shooting. What happened there with Mark David Campbell was very, very peculiar.
Well, it is, and that's a great segue to Marianne on a couple of different levels, because I believe I might be the first person to broach that subject. Probably, what was it, a couple of weeks ago? I said every nutcase that they ever catch has a copy of Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye. Yeah.
Remember me saying that, Mary?
I do, and you're right. It's true. Mark David Chapman had one, and so did John Hinckley.
Oh yeah, well, John Hinckley for sure. John Hinckley, for those of you that are too young to know who we're talking about, is the assailant of President Ronald Reagan. Nearly killed him too, by the way.
Yeah.
Nearly killed him. Were it not for the fact that Reagan is just too stubborn to die, he would have been dead by now.
Constitution.
Because he is rest in peace, but he died, a nice old man, of natural causes.
20 years later or something.
God bless him.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, though, Catcher in the Rye connection for sure with MKUltra. Also the Beatles, for sure. Mark David Chapman, for definite sure. Sirhan. And I believe Lee Oswald as well. We know factually, this is not even bullshit. We know factually that there have been at least 4 Oswald doubles used. Now, I got a hold of a piece of film the other day, just as a side note, that actually shows JFK's kill shot from the grassy knoll, taken from the opposite side of the street. And you can see the muzzle blast. As soon as the muzzle blast is seen, the president's head is gone. Tell me it's a coincidence. I dare you. I dare you.
No, I actually watched your show last week and saw that. That was amazing.
Yeah. It's there. In hiding in plain sight, the muzzle blast is right there. Now,
And no bodyguards on the
And
car.
the trajectory was from the sidelines, not
and
from
by
up
the
above.
way, Marianne, you just reminded me of something that I need to do for the benefit of Shirley Baby Bolstok.
What's that?
Hear me out. We're kind of, both of us are kind of right about this. We're, of course, being who we are, we're right in the middle of the shit fire. The front seat, driver, Secret Service. The second row, Mr. Connolly on a seat, his wife on a swivel seat. The back seats of the limo were taken out. There was a seat and a swivel seat attached. Okay. So there were smaller seats, but so keep in mind what I'm saying. So 2 and 2, there's 4. And then the entire back seat, which is technically a single seat, that would make it 5, but there were 2 people. So it was 6 people in a 5-seater. So there you go.
Is this before or after the Mandela effect that affected our brain? Because, you know, I only remember 4 people and 2 seats, but a roomy car.
And Angelo,
Yes, ma'am.
what do you think of this theory? Some think that actually Jackie herself took the shot because they show her grabbing something. He has a shot and she puts something in the back. What do you think of that?
It's interesting that you asked that question because I had a guest on my show. And Marianne, if you saw the show, you know who I'm talking about. Michael Murphy, Armageddon, is a former professional wrestler. He's also a former military gunman and artillery specialist. He thinks that Jackie was the intended target.
Yeah.
Because she was Camelot.
Yeah.
America wasn't. I got news for you. And I hate to burst the Kennedy bubble here, but listen, you're going to have to just deal with some reality, okay? John F. Kennedy was not a loved individual. He had some real radical ideas, and the status quo didn't like it. But the American public loved Jackie. They adored that woman. She was young and beautiful and cute, and she did all the right things and said all the right things to the press, and the press loved her, and they made her the Queen of Camelot. Michael Murphy said something interesting. If you take out the queen, the kingdom will fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, you know what, Murph? That's what happens. You know, like you cut off the head, the body's eventually going to die. So, yeah, go ahead, Cheryl.
So I found that really interesting. And there are also some who think that Jackie actually pulled the trigger on him. I have seen some of that. I didn't think so. I could never
I investigated that. Oh, actually, I actually did investigate that for another show I was on. I was actually a guest on the show. I will tell you that is absolutely not the case. It's physically impossible with the ballistic evidence to be the case.
Got it.
She would have had to have a really long fucking arm to do that one.
Yeah, she was right there. She's too close.
To pull that one off, she would have had to have a really, like, one of those Stretch Armstrong arms. Yeah. You know, you're not a boy, so you know what Stretch Armstrong was. A rubber.
A Fantastic Four for the younger set.
Well, here's the thing, and LBJ had a very, very special interest in Jackie also.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, he had a great disdain for the president. Tremendous disdain. They did not like each other at all. They both were drinkers. They both Jackie Kennedy and President Kennedy were both drinkers. They were both very temperamental. They were smokers. They were cheaters. They both cheated on each other. They cheated on each other in the White House. And you know, and nobody would believe back in the day. We know now, through the Freedom of Information Act and just common sense research that people do. Just look. If you want to know something, people put the hours into it.
Yeah,
that's what we do. We put the hours into it. I didn't get this, smart and good looking by just being here. Come on. I had to put the work. Look at Shirley. Look at Marianne. See this stuff? It's hard work looking this damn good.
I know.
But Marianne, so MKUltra, we think that, we know we more than think. We know that there were at least 3 Manchurian candidates during the decade of the 60s. And definitely the 70s, at least one in the 80s we know of. That being Mark David Chapman. I am absolutely certain of that.
And even possibly the gentleman who broke into George Harrison's house and stabbed him and nearly killed him as well.
Yeah,
I believe he was mind controlled as well.
Yeah, I have a little bit more basic feeling on that. I think that was a hit. I think that was a hit gone wrong. Yeah. I have my suspicions as to who I think did it, because they're still walking around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we'll get into that, because that's a whole nother.
That's another.
But MKUltra is an interesting program from a couple of perspectives. They used drugs. They used twins for sure. But Shirley and Marianne, there's something that they also did that's a special interest to all of us. They used psychics.
Oh.
They used psychics. The twin effect and the psychic effect, I think we would all agree, are hand in hand. It's undeniable that twins do have a kinetic psychic bond. That's factual. It doesn't matter who they are, where they're from. They have a kinetic psychic bond. That exists. It's just part of their DNA. It's a part of the bloodline. However, with the psychic itself, male or female, a standalone psychic has the gifts that they have to work with, their natural inclinations. Shirley has a way of doing her readings that I don't do. And I have a way of doing my readings that Shirley can't do. Okay? Just like with Marianne, what you do is a form of psychic work. The work that you do with the, you know, with the Medicare fraud and doctors and all this other kinds of stuff. That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
But it's psychic work, because a lot of it isn't on ink. A lot of it isn't tangible.
It's intuitive.
It's intuitive. It's from your gut. It's from your spirit, from your, and people have asked me, Shirley, what is a spirit? And here's what I tell people. When your heart and your head are on the same page, that's your spirit. When this and this are on the same page, therein lies your spirit. If your head is saying one thing and your heart's saying something different, don't listen to it, because you're being deceived. You're being deceived. And there are plenty of avenues of deception. But when your heart and your head are saying the same thing, and you can validate it with your gut, that's spirit. Then you know you're in the presence of spirit. It's that simple. And that's in one of my books, by the way, called Psychic Fingerprints, A Life's Manifesto, available through me, because it's not available on Amazon anymore. My first book is out of print. That was called Stay Tuned. You'll be interested in this, Shirley. My book was called Stay Tuned, the psychic life from a theological perspective. I gave you the cover, so you have it. You read it.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Now,
yes.
I'm going to try and get a hold of that book somewhere. I don't even have a copy of myself, and I wrote the damn thing.
Bookfinders.com may show where it's used somewhere.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Go ahead, Marianne. Go for it.
What?
You
just threw it to me.
So long.
Well,
I interrupted you. It's been so long. Go ahead. You were talking about like what you do. Intuitive gut.
Well, yeah, it's intuitive work, because you go on your hunches, and then you take those leads and you look and see where that, you have to go down those roads and the path and do your research. We have to do that with the book when we're researching.
Let me ask you a question. Has your intuition ever strayed and left you high and dry? My answer would probably be no, it hasn't.
Not really.
Okay. And that's what I'm getting at. Your instinctive intuition, or what I call your spirit gut, is never going to let you down. It's never going to give you the wrong answer. However, when the deceptive mind, and Shirley may understand what I'm talking about. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression before, but when the deceptive mind sneaks into the spirit, it can cause havoc. You can get a reading on somebody that's not a true reading. I'll give you a perfect example. You see these guys on television do it all the time. One of my favorite is this fraud named John Edward. Okay?
Yeah.
This guy goes fishing like I've never seen. Oh, my God. And Shirley knows what I'm talking about. You know what I mean by fishing?
We both do.
Okay. All right. Now, I will tell you about how I do a reading. I don't ask a single question. I don't ask a single question. And the only answers I will accept are yes and no. You can ask me all the questions you want, but I will never and have never, ever asked a single question. That's how I do a reading. And that's how a real psychic should do a reading.
Do it. Yeah.
Never ask a question. If you got to ask me a question, then maybe I should be reading you. Okay? Now, MKUltra utilized psychics, not, to do nice readings for people, not to bring joy to the world. No, they use psychics for covert spying, to spy on countries and what kind of warfare they had stockpiled, and the ammunitions that were in the silos, and that's what they did. And when you have that kind of intuitive harnessing from psychics who are basically good people working for these, let's just call them evil, sneaky bastards, then you got a problem, because all of that goodness is being harnessed for evil. Remember something. There's only two ways in the world: good or bad, up, down, east, west. Okay? That's it. Things are either horizontal or lateral. That's it. The circle is someone's imagination. I don't know who came up with the circle, but circles don't exist in my world. It's either up and down, side to side. That's it. Yes or no. There's no maybes. It's up or down. When you start going around, then you got a problem. All right?
It connects.
So the problem is that they utilized good psychics for bad work, Shirley. From your standpoint, and I'm going to shut up, and I want you to really go into some detail with this, because I'm going to sit back and listen for about 10 minutes. I want you to take your time and explain to everyone from your perspective how good, positive energy is harnessed into negative energy and how it can be used for evil purposes. Let people understand. Go for it.
So, well, my first understanding is when they were doing a recruiting of psychics, what they did was they had they tested a lot of people, and those who tested the highest were taken on and told that they tested the lowest. Okay, that they so they were told they tested the lowest, and that they were going to train them on how to remote view. And I think that a lot of them really did not understand what they were really being used for. They just wanted to do the job that was given to them. So they would get them out there, and they would say, we're harnessing them on, we're training you. And they would have 3 or 4 of them look at the same thing in order to see how they scored and how they were doing. When in truth, they were collecting information, finding out about bases, drawing pictures and, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? They had no idea what they were even looking at. They were just trying to do what they called their job or their work. See, so there was the first misuse of what I call taking good people and getting them to do work for evil people. And were their intentions evil? No, not at all. This was almost the fox, the fox on the run. It's a form of trickery that they were using towards these people. I think this is still very much used today, where people oh yeah, here we go, where people believe that it is in the best interest of a nation or best interest of the people or best interest of the job and then they use part of the ultra to convince them that this is the right thing to do. This resonates with them. There is nothing wrong with what they're doing. So they're changing their morality. They're changing what they consider moral.
Boy, you go. Must. I'll tell you what. You must be a very good psychic because you must be reading my fucking mind. I'm going to go there.
Steps.
And Marianne knows I'm going to go there. At the end of this broadcast, I'm going to show a video that's going to blow your fucking mind.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just chime in over here. I agree absolutely. I concur with absolutely everything you said. Let me ask you a question, though. Since I'm in agreement with you, I'm wondering if you think like I do in this regard. We know that they experimented on people who are disposable. We know they experimented on mental patients. Back in the day, called lunatics. We had terms like insane asylum, lunatic asylum. I hate these words. Nut house. I hate that term. But you had places that were housing mentally deficient or mentally incompetent individuals that were being used for government experimentation because they were disposable for all intents and purposes. They were disposable people. What happens, Shirley? And maybe Marianne, you jump in on this too, because I want to hear what you guys think. What happens when you have a world leader who possibly is the subject of such experimentation or suggestibility? I'll shut up now. Go ahead.
The name that comes to me is Adolf Hitler. Now
Definitely.
he was probably the greatest cult leader that ever existed. And
I'll give you one more.
Stalin.
That's going to blow your mind. Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This man
came out of nowhere.
Thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. He was a one-term junior senator, a one-term junior senator from Illinois, and sprung to superstardom literally overnight. Where did he get his money so quickly? Who put him up? Who supported him? Who bankrolled him? Who pulled his strings? Somebody with some seriously deep pockets got that guy elected.
Yeah.
Okay? Barack Obama. Because I'm going to show you a video tonight that Barack Obama's featured prominently in. Okay? I'll give you another one. Joe Biden. Interestingly, they're both from the same White House. They worked with each other. Joe Biden, who is now our president, God forbid, is scary fucking thought. And I'm not getting political here. I'm just talking about as a person. It's scary because he can't remember his name half the time.
Cognitive dissonant. Yeah, his cognitive abilities are.
So what happens, Shirley, when they get a hold of a guy like that? Talk to me. Marianne, talk.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Well, when they get a hold of a guy like that, what happens is he becomes, you've seen Chicago where they got the dummy on the knee, and it's talking. You think that, the mannequin is talking, but it's really the lip syncer that's, the ventriloquist that's really talking. And so they're put up front with the ideas of what's behind them. And we could call that the Illuminati, or, we could call it, Ultra, we could call it the bankers, we could call it many different things that, so it's like the charismatic star that's actually open to ideas. That's really what's put behind this person. And all they are is a front person for the control more of the people, of their ideas, of the change in what we might consider democracy. My understanding is they changed things in the schools. They went 3 generations back as to what they considered democracy. They stopped doing history. It's like by changing history, you change how people think.
Absolutely.
You glorify those that may have never been glorified, and ideas that were never accepted as a democracy.
Let me ask you a
goes on
question,
and on.
Shirley, because you're right there where I want you to be. Whether you know it, I'm guiding this conversation. And you're right where I want you to be. How does that play in to the conversation we all just had just a week ago? How does it play into the Mandela effect? Because it clearly does. And one of the things that struck me immediately was MKUltra Mandela. Then and now, same distance, same differential, same results. Okay? Same thing.
Different memories could be getting programmed into people.
Hello.
Yeah. You hear something over and over and over again, you start to believe it, and it becomes just normal.
And that just validated what Shirley was talking about how they were repetitive. They used to play these audios over and over, just incessantly. Sometimes many hundreds of thousands of crazy stuff. I mean, really bizarre. That they just would go nuts.
They did that for those people when they were giving them the LSD and giving them the electric shock, playing that over and over and over again to reprogram those people. And several of those ladies, they were housewives. They were in there for postpartum depression, and they thought they were getting the experiment of something that was going to get them out of their depression so they could go home.
Well, and that's a great point, Mayor. One of the and now we're going to talk about that actually. One of the things I said at the outset of the show was there are people who believe, and there's some evidence to back it up. I can't say there's not. There's some evidence to support the fact that these experiments actually helped some people, quite a bit of them actually. But my question would be, and Shirley, I'd be curious to get your, especially you, Marianne, I'd be curious to get your intake on this. We had lobotomies back then. We had, we had
bloodletting way back.
Yeah.
I mean, we had, different means and methodologies of transforming the brain. Okay. But why the need for drugs? What was it about the drugs, in your opinion, or maybe in your expertise, Shirley? What is it about using drugs to alter the mind rather than, the proverbial lobotomy with a, pardon my language, folks, but with a fucking ice pick? Because that's what they used.
Oh, I know.
Well, the LSD that was used, they weren't really sure at the very beginning what exactly it was going to do, and that's why they were using these.
Oh, they knew exactly, Mary.
Well, the experiments that came along to show how far they could push it.
Yeah, so. I don't know how much of that I'm willing to accept. I think they knew from the jump exactly what they were going to do.
But
I think they knew exactly.
Well, they say we only use 10% of our brains, and this would be accessing a subconscious part of the brain that would be open to accept truths, almost like being in a sleep state or being more hypnotic. So this would, they would open up the brain centers more. They would get into the subconscious. And with enough of this, then the subconscious would accept this as a reality and send the connections to the brain, as a reality.
Exactly. And so, the idea of having a bunch of, it's going to seem interesting today, in 2020, to use this terminology, to use, I have to laugh. I just have, what they did then, we're seeing the effects of now. Let's just be honest about it. We're watching a society of zombies. They created a society of zombies back then, albeit cloistered. They weren't, on a mass level, but we're seeing the MKUltra effect play out in our daily lives now, I think people are being zombified. I
Yeah.
think they're being, for real being zombified. No question about that. And I think that the long-term effects of this are far more reaching than we're even capable of understanding right now.
I'd like to
So,
put something on the table about that, Angelo. if I
yeah,
like.
please do.
The fact that their Project Monarch, which is considered to be part of MKUltra, which is why is it that the moths duplicate their exact spots as they, lay eggs, and then they would have exact spots, and then they would lay eggs and have exact spots, and these monarchs would only live 2 weeks, but they would keep duplicating the exact genetic structure. So do you think it's possible what they're trying to do is change the genetic structure in order to change the DNA for future generations?
Absolutely. But I think now, and you and I both agree that they're doing that. We disagree, however, slightly on the methodology.
Okay.
I believe that they're using food and atmosphere. And by the way, part of atmosphere in the 21st century that we live in now, part of atmosphere is acceptance of the fact that you live in a 5G world. We don't know what that stuff's going to do to our head. And by the way, if you ever want to see a film that's like where we are right now, it's called Zombie 5G. I'm not even kidding. There's a film called Zombie 5G. Go online, look it up. And here's the premise of it. You're going to love this. A mad scientist working for the government. Where have we heard that one before? Mad scientist working for the government figures out a way to tap into the 5G code to screw with people's heads.
Yeah.
How are they doing it? Hello?
Frequency.
Now.
They're foretelling again, right?
Right? So, yeah, I understand what Shirley's point was with that. Yeah, but understanding that atmosphere has its own frequency. Food has its own frequency.
All things.
5G is a frequency.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a literal frequency.
Yes.
Okay. So there's no guessing about what that is. So what do you think about that, Shirley? You think I'm off base? Am I crazy or what?
No, but I don't think you're off base at all. I think that, first of all, the way it's being put out there as a symbol of progress, of a symbol of monetary, gain, as a symbol of being in the know with knowledge. It's almost like the Adam and Eve, here's your apple, do you want to have the knowledge? And so when this is seen as an asset to the human race and to make us expand our intelligence, it's never even considered that it could be doing damage. And to me, that's a part of
and
a
that's
frequency
the scary
itself.
part. That's the scary part. The fact that they're not even considering what's going to what the potential.
They don't care what the potential is. They don't care about the population.
And that's, you know what? You see, Marianne,
when I speak up,
when you do, right? It's a gem, and that's the truth. No, shut. I'm gonna smack you. But that's the truth, though. The truth is that the truth is they don't give a shit.
No,
there are, and it's becoming more and more clear and more obvious. And by the way, just so we don't lose sight of the bigger picture, this is all biblical. It's all biblical. We're not making this shit up. You're as close to your Bible as you want to be. Open it up and read it. Because they said this was going to happen. Some really good prophets, psychics, a long time ago predicted our future. You know what, Shirley, can we talk about that? Marianne, can we talk about this too?
Sure.
Certain churches, I'm not going to name them, but certain churches in Tennessee would not let me into their church. Even some churches here would not let me into their church because I'm a psychic. And it's fairly well known as a psychic. I can't have the gift I have were it not given to me from a higher source.
not given.
Agreed.
Okay. So now, what's the difference? And I'm not being facetious when I ask this question. What's the difference between a psychic and a prophet, in your opinion, Shirley, and then Marianne?
Well, I think I'll go first on this one. You know, the psychic uses their intuitive abilities for the now. They are very much of their using the intuitive, you know, their environment around them. They may be able to read if somebody's lying, or if something has happened, maybe there's somebody buried underground. You know, that's all frequency. The prophets are bringing in a prediction within that direct timeline as something that is very probable to happen, dealing with the energy of that day. One of them was Nostradamus, and he was scrying into his black mirror, and he was seeing, you know, the flying machines. You know, perhaps decoding some of this might be a little tough to do, but he, and of course, he had to be very careful who the Pope had him, you know, kind of under, under scrutiny.
Yeah.
So he talked in code a lot, but when in Revelation,
he had to in the day. Remember, we should tell people, Shirley, that Nostradamus had to speak in code, because if he didn't, he'd be locked up for heresy.
Sure.
You know. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. Marianne, where are you on this this question of psychics and prophets and the divinity of one or the other?
I agree with Cheryl. They're, like she's saying, prophets, they're projecting into the future, versus the psychic that's talking in the day and now. I don't know too many that really go into the future. Sylvia Brown used to somewhat back in the 80s, 90s. But I believe that there's a lot of, unfortunately, people interpret the Bible in a way that makes the psychics look bad. I don't believe that's the case. I agree. I think there's good people and bad people. There's probably good psychics and bad psychics. You know, it's the person and who they're praying to, and that is where it comes over. Is it God-given? Yes, you guys have a gift. You didn't go and say, can I have this gift, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to give my soul away because I'm going to have it. No.
Well, that's a Pandora's box.
That's the Pandora's box that the church gives. So,
yeah. Well,
you know,
no,
they want to be the voice of God.
Agree with you, for sure.
Yeah. So, I firmly believe that if you're going to God's source, and you're asking for that guidance, your higher self is giving you guidance, then you're in the good.
What do people think they're using through prayer, asking an answer through prayer that comes into their mind? And,
but see, they're not taught that prayer is in that sense.
Logistics, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't get that. I don't understand that either. As the older I've gotten, the more I've questioned theology, and the more I understand, interestingly enough, because if you don't ask, you don't learn.
Right.
But when we're young, we're arrogant and we're cocky and we think we know everything and we're full of ourselves. And Shirley knows exactly what the fuck I'm talking about.
I was there.
Yep. Absolutely. So was I. And you start doing a bunch of television and people want your opinion on stuff, and you start doing radio and people come from all over the world to interview you. I've been that way. I had a woman in England. She dubbed me America's psychic bad boy because I talk the way I talk. Look, I don't put anything on for anybody.
You're from Philly.
This is me. But I've worked for those 3-letter agencies. And I'm in an interesting position. I've worked for those 3-letter agencies. I've worked for lawyers and doctors and police. I've done missing persons. I've worked for Interpol. Not worked for them, but I've done work for them.
Right.
I've done work for Scotland Yard. I've worked for all these individuals, groups. And I don't do anything different than I do every day. I can turn it on and off, thankfully. That took me years to learn how to shut it off because it was making me nuts.
Static.
But if somebody's in distress and they say, you know, Angelo, where's the body? Okay, come on.
Mhm.
And I use spirit guides that help me, and they are Mary and Seymour, and they are as well known as I am. Mary and Seymour have been with me a long time, but the one spirit guide that will never leave me is God.
Right.
You know, that's the essential of spirit God. You know, the spirit guides is God. You know, God is spirit. Yeah, and those who worship in spirit. That's not like you can see God unless you're on a really, really good, you know, like hallucinogenic trip, and then you see all kinds of stuff. But you can see the God within you for sure.
Mhm.
And I'm not being facetious. I'm not making light of any of this at all. I'm being totally serious. But MK Ultra was one of those programs that I believed and believe still today that tried to cut to the core of the heart element of psychology, because you can't have a mind without a heart, and you can't have a heart without a mind. The heart and the head work in unison. They work together. To me, and I've said it before, the essence of spirit is when the heart and the head say yes and the gut validates it. That's spirit. You're in the presence of spirit.
You're in that sine wave.
MK Ultra, yeah, MK Ultra attempted to sever that relationship between the mind and the heart, and damn near succeeded were it not for a bunch of people who said, hell no, we won't go. Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, no, I was just saying when
You're doing
about,
the eights.
I was doing the eights. It was Shirley's 8, but it's also, you know, it's it's bringing it around. It's the
Right.
infinity. It's the 8.
Well, I'm not
And it's the
totally,
sine
I'm not totally, but not, Shirley knows I'm very honest with Shirley. I'm not buying the whole 8 thing because I haven't had it explained to me just yet.
She'll show you. But
Well,
I wasn't
now's a good time as any.
I wasn't referring to it so much as Shirley with her
Because we still got to talk about your book. So
yeah. But I was talking about that in conjunction with the head, bringing the head and the heart together, and that forms that 8, which is also the infinite and is also the sine wave, and that is the wave that goes in.
Well, if you think about it,
yin and yang, and the whole, you know, it's the whole philosophy of.
It is an 8 if you think about it, because you're going from here, you're wrapping
it around, coming back up.
Am I right or wrong?
Yeah.
See, I'm always right. I love that. Shirley, walk me through these the grade 8s over here.
Well, I think that when I really explain exactly what I do with the number 8s, it might be better on a frequency or numerology type of show. But what I will say, one thing is on the 0-point frequency, 0, if you twist that 0, you have a number 8.
Sure.
But then there's an access point right in the middle. So what that tells me, it's a way of accessing the infinite, but yet going back to 0 point at the same time, but there's an access point where you can create, and that's why I like that number 8.
Well, you know that Einstein actually did that, or attempted to do that. You know, that was really the first noticeable glitch in the matrix when he tried to, literally, Einstein tried to fold over a parallel plane onto itself. If you twist a parallel plane, it becomes the number 8. Anything that's circular, if you twist it, you're going to get an 8. I don't care. Even a rubber band. You can do it with a rubber band. You could do it all day long with a rubber band. You know? Now, MK Ultra, as it plays into the shadow of a baseman.
Yeah.
You're not getting out of this one, young lady.
No. Well, it plays in all.
Shirley and I got plenty of time to talk about 8s because we're doing a mediumship show, and Shirley's going to be here a lot because we're going to do a lot of shit together. And you're going to be here because I got to plug your book and because I got to sell you some books.
Yeah. Plugging the book and it's very important to me to have this information get out for Paul. So that's that whole purpose. But
by the way, and speaking of Paul, and I want to nip this in the bud right now. Right now, there's a guy on Facebook named Stephen John McCartney. I know who you are. I found out who you are. I'm not going to expose you, as I told some people that I would. I'm not going to do that. You can go and continue to pretend to be Paul's son. You can do that. But I know who you are, and you know that I know who you are. So enjoy yourself. Enjoy the ride. Continue, Mary.
Well, I don't know how to respond on that note because
you don't need to.
Okay, well,
Talk
yeah.
about your book.
Well, when it came to the LSD aspect, the CIA was giving 5,000 hits of acid to bands for people who were not doing the line, trying to keep them in line. And the Beatles were laced multiple times. We mentioned on a previous show how George's dentist had laced Cynthia, John, and Patty and George in their tea. That was their first experience with that. There was many times they would go to ambassadors or parties or something, and even people from other bands would be lacing their drinks to the point where they started bringing their own beverages and things when they would come into places. They also then were taking that into the film festivals, the Monterey Film Festival, taking it to the Kool-Aid, and the kids then are drinking it, and then they're having that psychedelic.
And tell everybody, Marianne, when all of this happened. What time frame?
Well, for the Beatles being laced was in 64, 65 until.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
Stop right there. Interesting. There's no coincidence.
No
coincidence. What happened in 1964, Shirley? What significant event happened in 1964?
Ed Sullivan Show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy had been killed in November of 63.
Mm-hmm.
John F. Kennedy was gone. Lyndon Johnson was now the president.
Yep.
Okay.
2 months later.
Mr. Johnson got to fight out his war in Vietnam. Wonderful. What's in Vietnam besides a shit ton of oil? It came out on our show about the Kennedy assassination.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? Poppy.
Opiates.
Yeah.
Miles and miles and miles of poppy fields. Opioids.
Yeah.
From a poppy, you could derive any number of 200 or 300 hallucinogenics. Any kind of drugs you want, for good or evil, from a poppy. And they still do today. And they still get them from Vietnam, incidentally, and Korea. They're loaded with poppy fields. In 1964, Ed Sullivan opened up the door to the Beatles. America hears the Beatles.
Yeah. And he was brought into that. That was like a setup thing for him to see the Beatles and the reaction that he had when seeing them in London, for him to get them on his show. I mean, it was an orchestrated, not for the Beatles themselves, but it was still an orchestrated event.
Of course it was. And that's why I wanted to stop you there at when you said 1964, because there was no accident. So continue with the implosion of drugs from 64, 65, and where we are now.
65, and they continued on. I believe that Paul was taken out in November 66. And after that, and Paul was very much against drugs, the use of mind control aspects. I mean, he smoked pot. Paul had anxiety. You can see it in his interviews. A lot of times he has his fingers in his mouth. He's chewing on them. He's fidgety, you know. You don't see Billy doesn't. That's one characteristic he didn't bring over with his repertoire of Paulism.
Marianne, there's an interview that Paul McCartney or Billy does. Well, for the sake of the conversation, we'll call him Paul. In around, I want to say 65-ish,
Billy?
he does an interview with a newspaper columnist. Looks like it's out front. He's sitting on a chair out front somewhere.
That's you're talking about Billy?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Billy did that in 65. Paul was still alive. Billy did the interview in June.
Where he talked about smoking pot.
It was like 67, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Marianne?
Billy's interviews were in 67, where he was talking about LSD, and then there was they also caught him at the back door where he was sitting in a chair.
I have a question for you about that.
Okay.
I have a question. People who knew the Beatles, 64, even before that,
Right.
62, 63, 64, 65, right?
Right.
They knew the Beatles up to that point.
66.
They knew these guys, what they were all about.
Right.
Teenage girls back in the day, they knew when Paul took a shit. They knew when John combed his hair. They knew when Ringo brushed his teeth. Whatever. I mean, they knew, okay?
Right.
And they knew that they didn't do drugs, okay? That's what they knew, because that was what they were told.
Right.
However, I think it's pretty well been established that Paul was against drugs. I think that's pretty well established, biological Paul. Here you got this guy in 67 doing an interview outside on the set of a movie, right? And he's got this funky looking whatever this is on top of his head that's supposed to be hair. I don't know what that thing was. But he doesn't even look like.
It was a bad piece.
It was a bad piece.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? He doesn't even resemble Paul.
No, he didn't.
Not even close. How does somebody look at this guy and go, "That's Paul"? How?
Because they were told. You know, if he's associated, and there again, that's cognitive. People see him. He's with the boys. They call him Paul. They expect him to be Paul.
Well, let me stop you there for a second, because here's the thing. That interview, and I pointed that out for a very specific reason. It was the only interview with any of the Beatles from 66 to 68. Here's why. Because from 66 to 68, they were allegedly in the studio. You did not see them. When you saw Paul again for the first time, Billy, but you know, Paul for the conversation's sake.
Billy.
When you saw him again, it was on the David Frost show with the band where he sang Hey Jude for the first time.
Right.
Okay.
With different colored eyes.
He looked like Paul there, where he did not look like Paul in the 67 interview. So clearly that interview, here's the intimation that I'm making. I don't think we were supposed to see that interview. I don't think it was ever supposed to be seen.
Yeah, it was. I believe it was a paper interview, and
exactly, it was a newspaper.
But there again, when on a previous show that we've done, I brought up the fact that the internet has opened Pandora's box, because now we're able to go back and research all these films, all the image. Now they've been using CGI and they've been manipulating pictures and videos to, you know, morph the two into looking alike. But you can definitely see the differences.
Just to prove your point, I have the movie Help.
Right.
Okay. I have a copy of the movie Help. I bought several years ago. And then I watched the movie Help on a cable channel. Not all that long ago, 4 days ago. Okay. Within the week. Within this last week. You'd be hard pressed to tell me that somebody didn't fuck around with that movie.
That's true.
You'd be very hard pressed to tell me that someone did not screw around with editing that film. because it's not the same movie. It's not the same film. There's all kinds of computer manipulation in that film that's not in the original Help.
Right.
Magical Mystery Tour, don't even get me started with that one. Okay? Don't even
Can you
get me
imagine
started with that one.
Well, yeah.
Because that's like off the chart with like crazy shit.
Right.
So
I can't even imagine Paul doing that. Real Paul would never. Well, anyway, there's a lot of things I think real Paul would never do.
So let me ask you the magic bullet. Let me ask you the magic bullet question. Interesting. We talked about the magic bullet.
Magic bullet.
So where is your head on this MKUltra question with regards to the Beatles? How do you think MKUltra was introduced to them? Do you think it was in fact introduced to you? And how do you think that it played out in the overall, scheme of things?
How it could have been introduced to them themselves is when they were laced. I mean, we don't know what was going on at the time when these things happened, how long those trips lasted. I've heard bad trips happened. So what was going on during those, I don't know what was being programmed.
Okay. I'm asking you for a reason, Marianne. And here's the reason. Interestingly enough, I agree with the notion that the Beatles were a planned entity. I don't think they were organic. I think that they were a psychological operation from the get-go. As do I also believe were a few of the British groups. The Dave Clark Five we know for sure because they were already, two of them have already admitted to spying. Some people even would suggest that Elvis Presley was a product of, that vast psychological background.
Yeah,
You'd be hard pressed to deny it.
I'm not going there.
To deny
I don't go there with the Beatles. I think they were watched. I think they were observed. When they went to Hamburg, they put in the work, and it was noticed that they put in the work. They had the charisma, and they had the abilities. And
well, it's clear they put the work in, absolutely.
The top of the groups that were being looked at, and as a result, they were promoted. And they were, and what was going on behind the scenes versus what was with them, they're different things.
Shirley, let me put forward a scenario. This is my hypothesis. And I strongly suggest that the following may have happened. Bear with me.
Okay.
I do believe that the Beatles were a psychological operation. I believe that the Beatles were clearly manipulated by the Tavistock group and the British government. I also know factually, you could check it out. I also know factually that Tavistock was involved in hallucinogenics for sure. So was MKUltra. So, by the way, was the MI5, which is the equivalent of, if you want to call it like the British version of the CIA, military, quasi-military intelligence group, okay? It's funny to say military and intelligence in the same sentence, but that's just me. But that's my suggestion. I think they were introduced as a part of conditioning. What say you to that, Shirley?
Well, I have kind of an interesting theory about that. Now, first of all, we know that the Tavistock, even back in the year 1900, were predicting by the time the 1960s come, there was going to be a new generation. They were able to work with algorithms. They were not prophets. They were able to predict through human nature. And that the hippies at the time, with their love and free love, could have changed that whole world into becoming a much more loving place, a much more spiritual place. So, of course, it was very important for them to bring in a drug culture and turn them into zombies, bring in the Grateful Dead type of thing, which were CIA agents, this type of thing, and when they were able to start infiltrating the minds of these, young people by bringing in music that was more akin to drug culture, they idolized these heroes. But I also, this is what I think, Angelo, that the use of frequency was being introduced into the music at that time in order to enhance emotions. Now, one of the things I thought was most interesting about a gal describing the Beatles is, oh my God, you feel that it's so individual, it's just for you, but yet it's for everyone. Because I think that there were frequencies that induced endorphins in the system, particularly with the women, that would cause them to fall in love or feel like they were in love with them.
Shirley, how many times have you heard or seen a video or old video of a Beatles fan, a girl going, Paul was singing just for me?
Yes. Yes.
Marianne, how many? There's
all the time.
Thousands of those clips.
Thousands
of it.
Girls fainting.
He was looking right at me. He was singing just to me. Yeah, you and the other 25,000 people in the arena. But doesn't matter because he was singing to me. And that's the thing. Predictive programming also ties into this very, very prominently. Everything Tavistock did then, sing it now.
Right.
Yes.
Sing it now.
That was part of the game Paul didn't want to play.
One of the things that came out on the Kennedy show that we did was these secret societies are real good to sticking to plans because that's all they do is plan. Yeah. That's all they do is stick to plans. That's their MO. If you understand that, then you understand how to defeat them.
Yes.
It's not rocket science. It's simple. That's like being a psychic. It ain't rocket science. It's really not. I know people who I go crazy with that. I'm not even going to start with that now, Shirley, because we'll be here for 3 hours.
Yes.
And I've done shows that were 3 hours long. But here's the thing, though. Let's cut to the chase. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's clearly a frequency and a vibrational thing for sure. Were it not, you would not have the kind of reactions from these fans that you have. That's number one. Number two, they wouldn't do what you're suggesting they do, which is go out and buy our new record. Go out and join our fan club. Every little suggestion that the Beatles made, they did.
Well, they knew how to market themselves, and Paul was the best PR person.
I know. Look at behind you. You got shit all over the place behind you.
Well, I learned from the best.
Including that really good book you got. By the way, it's a great book.
Thank you.
Even though you took a little while getting me mine, I finally got it.
Yeah, that was the deal. I couldn't help that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, for real. But, I mean, we can go.
That's another subject.
Man. I said to my friend Nikita and Mike Murphy when they were on the Kennedy show, I think the Kennedy assassination gave us the word rabbit hole.
Oh,
because every time I find just a little opening, it becomes this, this pinprick. This pinprick becomes like a crevice.
Yeah.
And you think you're going to just talk for a couple of minutes and you end up,
5, 6, 7 subjects later.
You know what it is? There are so many arteries to these subjects. It's like your vein. You've got the one vein, but then you got all these, arteries that go into different directions. And that's what these rabbit holes are. They're all these different directions, and they take us down this crazy road called life.
Think of that huge tree and the trunk and all the branches and the twigs and the little buds.
Yeah, and you know what? But it's crazy and it's wonderful and it's frustrating. It's all of these things, all these emotions. To use Shirley's terminology, it's a plethora of frequencies and vibrations colliding at the speed of sound. And that's really what life is. It's frequency and vibration colliding at the speed of sound. And we just have to learn how to navigate it. I told you it's not rocket science. Just watch this. No studying. Mayor.
What?
Promote your book.
Oh, I can't. You know what? I can't see you, Angelo, so I don't know what you're doing. Promote my book.
Behind you.
Huh?
I said promote your book. It's right behind you.
Yeah, no, never mind. Yes, my book's right behind me. It's right here in front of me. It's always with me. Everybody just go buy it. It's a great, first off, let's put it this way. It's layered. If you like murder mysteries, it's a great murder mystery.
Oh, it really is.
It's a great murder mystery. If you're a Beatles fan and you know, there's so much in here about, I mean, because you can see it's not a little book.
No, it's a thick book. It's like 450 pages.
Until the next book, because I already am projecting it's going to be at least 500 pages.
Oh, you're killing me with this.
And that's
I'm gonna have to. Do I have to buy another piece of furniture just to put your books on?
Maybe. Just get a piece of steel.
No, I get books from every author that appears on the show.
The next book is the nonfiction book, and it has all the resources and all the information that has been.
And we should tell people, Marianne, that it's a. This is the Shadow of the Baseman. The Shadow of the Baseman is the first of a three-part trilogy.
Right.
Believe you said the second one is going to be called
Smoke and Mirrors. The Shadow, Smoke and Mirrors.
Smoke and Mirrors, Shadow, Smoke and Mirrors. And the third one has yet to be determined. So we're not going to talk about that.
The Shadow. It's the Shadow series. This book here goes into, this is Paul's story. There's been a lot of PID books out there. I haven't really read them, so I don't know how they flow. This one, we took it into Paul's perspective, what happened to him telling his story. And it was really important for us to have that because we feel like Billy's story is out there. It's what he wants to have the world projected upon whatever is going to happening. And we wanted to make sure that Paul had his say as best we could.
You know, it's interesting, Marianne, as you're talking, I'm looking at that picture of Paul over your left shoulder.
Yeah, this one.
And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what he would have looked like today.
I know. I think of that a
lot. I'm thinking I can't even picture him.
Handsome. He would have aged.
Yeah, but I can't even picture him looking like what Billy looks like. I can't.
We agree.
I can't. I just don't think it's the same guy. I've been saying it a long time. I said that's not Paul.
Right.
I said this years ago.
The face markers don't line up. People, if they do their research and even just on the photographic evidence alone.
I first became aware of the Paul is dead speculation when it started in 1967 is when I became aware of it. And then, of course, there was a big newspaper article in '69 and a DJ calling into somebody calling into a phone line and that whole bit, and that was off the chart.
That's a life of its own here in the States.
Boy, did it.
And we get into all this in the book. There's so much that we get into for people that are not aware of the Paul is dead rumors that happened in '69. And went back to 67, back to 67. The thing is, the Beatles, what people need to realize is the Beatles did not need to sell albums. They were selling on their own. They didn't need the publicity of Paul is dead rumor. They didn't need to put all these hints and clues and backmasking into these albums, not only in their Beatle life, but in their solo careers.
Yeah.
Continued. And John backmasked his own albums, his solo careers.
Absolutely, of course.
So
absolutely they did.
And we're putting all that stuff is in the second book as far as all that research.
And it's interesting because the relationship between John and Paul, or John and the fake Paul, we'll call him. That relationship changed exponentially after 1966 in a big way.
Oh, yeah.
Because John and Paul were buds.
Yeah.
Billy was not a bud.
No.
Billy was nobody's bud. Billy was for Billy.
Billy was for Billy. Billy wanted to run. Billy ran the show. Billy took over, and that's, when somebody says what happened and Yoko took down the Beatles. No, she didn't.
No, she didn't. Yoko had nothing to do with the breakup of the Beatles.
No.
Yoko was a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Yoko was the Oswald of that group. She was a patsy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because one of the things that, as I'm thinking about it now, talking about what could have been and what would have been, it's interesting to think about how Paul McCartney's music would have played out today. We'll never know, because what we're hearing is not Paul McCartney's music. It's some completely other different person.
Right.
And it's good music, and don't get me wrong, it's good music, but we'll never appreciate what we've been robbed of. I guess we'll never have to worry about it in some regard, because you can't miss what you don't have.
Well, we can. We can't miss it. We just, because we know it would have been good.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think there was an arsenal of Beatles music that was still out there that Billy went ahead and redid, on his own. And also, wasn't there, Marianne, a difference? They've done these voice prints that there is a big difference in this.
Oh God, yeah.
Voice print analysis. There was a voice print analysis done.
It's not even close.
And they compared yesterday, Penny Lane, and Hey Jude.
Yeah.
There was all three were different. I believe yesterday was Paul, Hey Jude was Billy, and Penny Lane was a combination of the both. Because
I got news for you. I saw that probably the best thing I saw, really interesting too, was a split screen of Paul doing yesterday on the Sullivan Show, and Billy doing yesterday at a live concert.
Right.
But what they did was they timed it perfectly. They synchronized the song with the two people singing. It doesn't even sound the same.
No. He did that in
concert. The phrasing's different.
He did that in concert. Put up Paul playing yesterday behind him.
Yeah.
I've done those myself. And, you try and work so hard. It's really hard to try and get your laptop going and your phone and whatever is how I did it. I did For No One. He had done in concert, and played it against the Revolver version. And they don't sync up. And even when you try, they're going to get out of sync. Paul sings slower. Billy speeds things up, because his voice, to imitate Paul's voice, he has to do some manipulation, whether it's keys and or speed. And
if I say the name Brian Ray, you know who I'm talking about?
You're talking about the bass player or the guitar player for Paul.
Brian Ray is the current Paul McCartney lead guitarist. He said something interesting, and you got to shake your head like, what the hell does he mean?
I think I know.
And it's on film for the world to see.
Yeah.
He says, and I quote, "He's the best Paul McCartney in the world." Well, what other Paul McCartney would he be? Well, apparently there were a couple of them that floated around. At least three we know of. There was Billy, there was Paul, and there was Ian. There's one you haven't heard of. Ian. Look that one up.
Okay.
Shirley, promote your book.
Well, my books are poetry and original quotes.
Promote them. Promote away, lady.
The poetry book is Impassioned Soul. My quote books are Apples from the Tree of Life and Grapes from the Vines of Life. And of course, I'm also getting a haiku book together. So it's poetry is a passion, and my brain doesn't stay quiet.
Can I ask you a question? What the hell's a haiku?
The
I still
575.
don't understand that. I don't know what it is. What is it?
17 sounds. They call it 17 sounds in Japan. So it's almost like syllables. So,
Oh, okay.
you know, here is the red house. It looks out over a hill, you know, isn't it
Okay.
pretty? You know, something like that.
So
Yeah.
is it indigenous to the Far East?
Yes. Yeah. The 17 sounds.
Origin.
Yeah,
So it's like a real
Americanized.
thing.
It's a 575. Yes,
And it's a
absolutely.
part of
In
their
fact,
culture.
I
So
reviewed
it's not like
haiku
some,
books.
it's not some flighty, esoteric psychobabble bullshit, right?
No, I know
Okay, cool.
psychobabble, but it's not haiku. The thing is about that haiku is I reviewed some of the top haiku writers in Japan. I got the opportunity to do that. I got to tell you, it certainly humbled me, and it's a beautiful work of art.
Beautiful. My book is called Psychic Fingerprints, A Life's Manifesto. I can still get people copies if they want. It's no longer in print, but I have a guy who will crank them out for me. It takes me a couple of weeks to get them to you, because everything that I had, I sold out everything I had. My first book sold out in 7 months. Well, almost 8, but like 7.5 months. My first book sold out. It was called Stay Tuned, a psychic look from the theological perspective, and it was a look, a look at what I do from the mindset of the inner soul, from the spirit, from the Godhead. Because without God, there's no gift, and it's just that simple.
Right.
Without God, there's no gift. Ladies, this was a fascinating conversation. This was. I won't have to tell Justin. You know what? I love you, Justin. You're a cool guy, but stay the hell home. No. I'm not going to do that. I would not do that, Justin. I like Justin. He's a very cool guy. I'm glad we just hung out tonight. Shirley, tell everybody what we got coming up.
Well, you and myself and Anthony Quinata have a medium show coming up on the 25th.
Yep.
And then on the 1st, we're going to do the glitch in the matrix.
Yeah.
April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's a perfect day. Perfect day for it.
Yeah.
Yes, glitches in the matrix, and that'll be me, Marianne, and Justice. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. I found let me tell you something. Let's talk about that real quick before we let you go. I went on a search and destroy, a glitch in the matrix, right? Because there's a film I watched called A Glitch in the Matrix, brand new film. And by the way, one of the people that's a proponent of that is a guy named Jordan Peterson.
Oh.
And I have invited him on the show. I have not heard back from Jordan yet, but because he's a really busy guy and everybody wants him. Because he doesn't charge for his appearances. Interestingly enough, good for him. God bless him. But I have a word out to Jordan. If he gets back to me, that's great. If he doesn't, we'll forge ahead. But when you search out a glitch in the matrix, you get some of the most obviously photoshopped shit you'll ever see. And it's like, okay, now how obvious is this? As some teenager did this on their Photoshop.
Sure.
Right.
Okay. I want to see something like the Philadelphia experiment. That's a glitch in the matrix. Okay.
Montauk Projects, Philadelphia experiment, and real people just write about stuff that they just can't explain, and those are the glitches I really want to bring out.
I have a personal glitch in the matrix story that I will tell on that show. I'll give you a little heads up. Okay. I met myself.
Interesting.
Okay. That's all I'll say.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
In the astral plane?
I was astral projecting at the
Yeah.
believe it or not, is what I was doing. I have the ability to astral project. And
That's
that
wonderful.
simply put, that means to put myself in another location spiritually. And anybody can do it. It's like I said, it's not rocket science. You just have to know what you're doing. And it's something that can be taught, you know? And you can't make this stuff up. You could teach someone to astral project. Because I had it taught to me by a master. But it's easy stuff. It's simple stuff. But you got to be careful. It's like anything else. If
Sure.
you take advantage of it, it will come back to bite you on the butt. On behalf of my dear friend Marianne Howard, the book Shadow of a Baseman, on behalf of Shirley Baby Bolstok, author of haiku poetry from Japan and all over the world, I am Psychic Medium Angelo. For Wrestling with the Future Radio Network, this is Cryptic Corner. Take care. Good.
Bye-bye.
Good to everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.